My wife and my kid were staying out overnight, and I had the house to myself. I went to take a shower, leaving the washroom door open, such a luxury. Being energy conscious, I of course left the lights out in the hallway. Anyway, I had a nice long hot shower, and I was getting out when something caught my eye. I saw a tall man's bald head as he walked slowly and silently across the dark, open the doorway to the washroom. My heart nearly stopped on the spot. The outside doors were of course locked. I had not heard anyone coming in. How did this guy get into my house? What did he want? He must have heard me showering. He could see the light was on. Trembling in terror, I peeked out the door all wet and naked, clutching a tiny pair of scissors used to trim my nails, the most inadequate of weapons, but the only one available, and discovered all the answers. My son had one of those Mylar birthday balloons filled with helium. It was usually pressed up against the ceiling, but it must have become partly deflated. It was floating 6 feet off the ground. It had floated in the air currents right by the door, gleaming in the light from the bathroom, looking just like a man's bald head, and walking slowly and purposefully across the doorway. I was about 15 and at home alone, watching The Legend of Boggy Creek. Upstairs I hear a sound. I get up, walk upstairs, and the door to my brother's bedroom at the end of the hall is closed. But there's someone or something banging on the door from the inside. The door is shaking violently. I run downstairs to get a baseball bat and go back upstairs. I grab the doorknob. Whatever is doing this is banging on it loudly. I take a deep breath, open the door, and there's my dog on a chair. She was trapped in the room and standing on the chair, scratching at the door. The fact that she was on the chair made it seem like the banging was coming from a human or undead level. Hiding in our dark basement with our 5-year-old, a huge tornado barreled over our house, killing many people, destroying neighbors' homes, and ripping apart the entire city. Russian rockets are exploding so close to my house that the windows open halfway and all the car alarms outside start simultaneously. One such case isn't that scary, but when it's happened 5 times in a few hours and each time it gets closer to you, it makes you wonder. Maybe going to a bomb shelter would be a better idea in this particular case. One time my parents left on a trip and I was home with the dogs for the first time in what felt like forever. I took advantage of standing in front of and having complete control over the living room TV. I saw a man standing in the window, looking directly at me. I jumped up and effing bailed. It was my own reflection in the window. I was young and in the house babysitting my little sister. It's early in the morning and there's frantic knocking at the front door, asking for help. It sounded like my neighbor, so I opened it. In his steps was a drunken man I don't know. He walks into the house and into the living room and starts pacing. My little sister comes to the top of the stairs and I whisper for her to hide. I ask the man what he needs and he tells me he needs the police. I call 999 and try to explain vaguely what's going on as I don't want to provoke him. The lady on the phone asked me to try to get him to leave the house and wait for them outside. He'd been involved in an assault on a taxi driver, and she's concerned I'm alone. I'm about 13 years old with a highly intoxicated, possibly dangerous man. I ask him to wait outside, and after some conversation, he does. I lock the door as quick as I can, and I cry. Check on my sister, and we go to bed. The police did not check on me to see if anything had happened. Luckily, nothing had. It could have gone horribly wrong, but I'm grateful it didn't. During early COVID, I lived on my own in a flat in an apartment building. One day at around 6 a.m., I woke up to a frantic knocking on my entrance door. I got out of bed, looked through the door's spy hole but saw nobody, and thought it was a prank by some kids. While I was turning away, I heard the knocking again, with some hissing-like noises mixed in. Another look, still nothing, so I carefully opened the door. In front of it, my neighbor, 20-year-old shy and small girl, knelt on my doormat, eyes wide open, holding her throat with both hands and forcing out a rasping and hissing voice that she got something stuck in her throat, crying out of pure terror and panic, apparently also having her mom on the phone on speaker, both of them screaming like trapped animals. I asked her if she could still breathe, and she nodded, so I called an ambulance, telling them what I knew. I got asked by the hotline if she has trouble breathing. Yes, but not choking. And if she is sweaty. Yes. Ambulance took 20 minutes to arrive at my apartment, as it took them some time to switch into hazmat gear. Apparently, breathing problems and heavy sweating are indicators of COVID-induced choking. It turned out she did not have COVID at all, but instead got a piece of plastic from a frozen yogurt container that she had for breakfast stuck in her throat. And only after they pointed it out did I remember that I was still naked in bed. I was exhausted, got into bed fully clothed, and fell asleep on top of it instantly. I didn't realize I was asleep. Next thing I know, I'm kneeling next to my bed, thinking to myself, man, oh, she's not real. I peered over and saw this horrific banshee or old woman looking at me. Needless to say, it instantly woke me up. I didn't realize I couldn't move at the time, but I looked with my eyes to the left, where I saw her in the dream. She was still there looking at me. She opened her mouth, and while no sound came out, my whole body felt like it was resonating in pain with it. She vanished a few seconds later. Sleep paralysis. This bitch. I live in an apartment. They did inspections and minor repairs on the breaker boxes a few years ago. They came in and did mine, and the next day, with no notice, I heard a literal banging on my door. I'm going to ignore it because it was 9 a.m. and I genuinely didn't care. But then I hear slamming. I opened my bedroom door facing my front door, and a grown man slammed my door off the hinges. I screamed, "What was wrong with you?" at him, and he didn't speak really English. Is okay. My door frame was shattered. He communicated that he needed to see if the paint around the breaker box needed to be repainted. Looks in my closet, where it was, leaves and comes back with a nail and a hammer, kind of loosely reattaches my door and hammered in the frame. I'm dumbfounded. He leaves. I go to the office, where no one believes me for a hot minute. They have a maintenance man follow me, and he fixes my door for real. I never saw that one repair guy again. I struggle to sometimes leave my apartment, and part of it is not trusting my maintenance men because of that experience. Gave me mild PTSD that's not complimenting my agoraphobia. This is not scary in and of itself, but I still don't know what happened. There are 3 people living at home, me, my sister, and my mother. A couple months ago, my mom was out on vacation, and one night, I opened the back door to take out some trash. I was sweeping the floor and left the mop on the kitchen. I wasn't out for all of 1 minute, but I came back and the mop was nowhere to be found. We never found it. There was no way anyone could have come in and gotten it, and why would anyone take just a mop? It never appeared, and to this day, we have no clue what could have happened. I was standing in the darkened living room joking with my early teen daughter when we heard a half-dozen shots fired about a block away. Her eyes got wide, and I told her to go into her room, with 2 walls between her and the outside. Also, once a guy rang our doorbell but crouched down so he couldn't be seen through the camera. He had one hand on the doorknob. I don't know what he was thinking because the door was all glass panes. I told him to get out of my yard, and he left. Our first house was gas, and we had a big propane tank outside for it. A couple weeks into living there, my girlfriend and I woke up to our entire house filled with fumes. Everything was super hazy. I immediately yelled out to not light an effing thing and opened all the doors and windows. It cleared out pretty quickly, but it was definitely a bit scary. Somehow, we left the stove burner knob turned over, so it was basically spraying out for 8 hours. Must have happened while we were cooking dinner or cleaning up afterwards. A tornado struck our house at 5 a.m. We were asleep, but luckily the train whistle sound they make woke me. A tree crashed through our daughter's room and landed on her bed while we were running for the basement. It sheared our porch off and broke every window in the house. We were lucky to have no injuries, but power lines were down for 6 hours and we couldn't leave. Living in a mountain chalet alone with no paved roads, it's a snowstorm while I get hit with what I thought was a kidney stone. I called 911 and the ambulance was not able to locate my chalet, and thanks to snow, they had to locate a police 4x4 who still struggled to locate my spot. I had to walk up the road half a mile for them to see me and get me into the 4x4, then an ambulance in pain beyond pain. It turns out my gallbladder, full of stones, developed gangrene, and I was rushed into emergency surgery. 4 days later, I was released from the hospital and back home. The next day, I started looking for a house and found one, as living off-grid was cool until I learned it's very complicated to get emergency help when desperately needed. I've told this story before, but it fits here. I was a young mother with 2 very young children. My husband worked nights, leaving me alone with 2 children. My daughter was an infant, and we had a baby monitor. One night I heard a small baby crying, so I went into her room to find her sleeping away. This continued for many nights, and I thought I was just imagining things. Then one night I heard a baby crying and went into the room. As I was checking on my daughter, I heard a woman softly singing a lullaby and shushing a baby. To say all the hairs on my body are raised is an understatement. I told my husband what happened, and he said I was probably having a dream, as it happened late at night. A few days later, I met my neighbor, who also had a very young girl. We started talking, and she mentioned weird noises from her baby monitor and how she was going to return it to the store. It was at that moment that we both realized we were picking up each other's baby monitors, so the lady singing lullabies was her. Some guy showed up when I was home alone and said he was here to inspect the radiators. He asked me if he could check out the one in the attic, and thinking this was something that was actually meant to happen, I went ahead and showed him to the attic. He looked around briefly and then said he was done and left not long after. I brought up what happened to my parents later on that day, and they were shocked. They questioned me on what happened exactly. It led to the police coming over to ask me several questions about it, and I genuinely felt like I was going to get in trouble for doing something I didn't realize was wrong. The police reassured me I wasn't in trouble, yet it's a situation I've never been in before with the police, and I was really anxious. My wife had just left. I was in the garage, smoking a bowl. I heard the side gate open. I'm confused. Why didn't my wife open the garage door? Is that trickster trying to scare me? I hear the back sliding glass door open. I casually walk into my house. I see 2 teens to early 20 kids or young men in my house. They turn and book it. I chase them instinctively. They get away. They dropped a cell phone, and one of them lost a shoe. I grabbed some nitrile gloves, grabbed the items, and put them in a gallon Ziploc bags for the police when they arrived. It wasn't until after the police left that I remembered what I was going to do in the garage after I smoked. I was going to clean my lock, so I had it in the garage. It wasn't near me, and I didn't even think about it since I thought it was my wife. But I saw it sitting on the shelf where my cleaning materials are, and was like, oh shit. I ended up not cleaning it and putting it in the gun safe. I don't think I would have shot fleeing kids, but damn, that was scary. My daughter choked on her birthday cake on her first birthday. She had done the thing where we let her dig into the cake with her hands and stuff her face. I got all the pictures and everything was good. I went into the living room to talk to a family member. It was an open floor plan so I could see into the kitchen where she was sitting in her high chair, but I wasn't watching her consistently as I talked to my family member. My dad, wife, and a couple others were standing around my daughter as she continued to eat cake with her hands. I looked back into the kitchen and saw that my daughter's face was a deep red color, moving toward purple. I didn't even think to yell at my wife or dad. I just sprinted across the house into the kitchen and ripped my daughter out of her high chair. She was now a deeper shade and exhibited no signs that she was getting any air. I flipped her upside down and gave her back blows until the cake fell out of her mouth and I can hear her crying. The whole thing only took about 15 seconds, but it was terrifying. I lived in a rural, swampy area. There are a lot of French doors. At 3 a.m., people are banging on the front door. Little mini Yorkies yap. I tried to ignore it, but they were moving across the front of the house, knocking or banging on all the doors. I had a gun in my hoodie pocket and the phone in my other hand, calling 911, trying to explain what was happening. 2 men were yelling and knocking, trying to get me to open the door. I told them I was on the phone with 911. They said they were cops looking for some name and address that wasn't mine. One held up a neck ID tag, but I couldn't see it. They kept talking over each other, and I told 911 to send someone. That isn't a quick process here. They kept saying, "We're law enforcement." I said again they had the wrong house, and why would I believe two actual law enforcement officers couldn't read the address of my house and whatever piece of paper they were reading? I told them the cops were on the way. I stepped back to where they couldn't see me, but I could see them. Again, a lot of windows and French doors. I kept one hand on the gun and my phone in the other. They sped off. The cops showed up, didn't know anything about it, and was scared of my cat. I didn't sleep well for a few days. I think they were probably skip chasers or whatever they're called, but the fact that the two couldn't match an address. I was home alone doing laundry in the garage while a rainstorm was going on outside, and I was switching my laundry from the washer to the dryer, and I hear this dripping noise. So I look around to see if there's a leak, and the leak happens to be going straight into my empty clothes basket that's sitting about 2 feet from the washer. I grab it to tip it out so I can put my clean clothes in after they're dry, and I notice the water is extremely red, like watered down blood was red. And I freaked the F out about it, get up on the ladder to check the ceiling to see if a dead animal was up there, and realized that where the leak was coming from would be on the balcony. I never use, but my roommate's room has direct access to. So I go up on the balcony, 100% expecting to find something. A suspicious bag is leaking a red fluid that the rain is washing into the garage. It was just like some red leaves breaking down in the storm drain. I cleared them out and raked the leaves up in the rain, and I felt really dumb for being so scared about it. I had a tree fall on it in a hurricane. It wasn't extreme damage. I really managed to fall on it in about the best way possible, but I saw it coming right towards me through a window. I didn't think it was going to die or anything, but I for sure thought I had to get out of the way or I was in trouble. With hindsight, if it really fell badly, there's no way I'd be able to get out of the way. It didn't fall very quickly, so I didn't think that helped, but it was a massive tree that stretched across the whole property into the neighbors. Less scary, but some kind of power line failure on the telephone pole. Something blew up and banged around on the pole. Maybe the loudest thing I heard was setting part of the yard and neighbor's fence on fire. It was pretty small and easy to manage. Fortunately, I was home and it was sorted out, but that was the only one. It was a bit of a, actual emergency I have to deal with moment. I live in a house with my girlfriend and another couple. I'm watching TV at around 2 a.m. in the living room. My girlfriend is asleep, the other guy is asleep, and I assume the other girl is out in her study, which you had to go outside to get to, so the back door is unlocked. From my vantage point, you can see a portion of the kitchen, which is next to the back door. I hear the back door swing open, assume it's my housemate, and continue watching my TV show. About 15 minutes later, I happen to glance through the doorway into the kitchen, as I hadn't heard my housemate either leave the house again or wander through to the bedrooms. House is quite low. And there's a guy standing in the corner of the kitchen staring at me. He had a brown jacket on, dark eyes, dark hair, and was clutching a bottle of Midori, shoulders slumped, staring at me. When he sees that I've noticed him, he moves. I get up from the floor and chase him to the kitchen, but he's gone. Carefully go back out the door. Nobody's there. Out the front, nope. In the driveway, down the street, just nowhere to be found. It still gives me chills to think about it. TL, DR. A man breaks into my house while I'm there, stares at me until I notice, then just disappears.